And here we are. Hey
Yay!
guys, Kyle and Dave here from KaiZen and ReBoot. Um, Back for another rambling as such. How you doing, Dave? You okay?
Yeah, really, really good. Thank you, Kyle. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm all good. Apart from the stresses that we've already discussed, it's been one of those weeks this week, so might be a bit relevant to some of the stuff that we may well end up talking about. But there it goes.
Yeah,
But no, all good, all good. Been a testing week, but it's all good.
yeah, good man. Good man. Well done. So, Kyle, what were you talking about that article that you read? Let's start there because that sounded quite interesting, and I think very relevant for some of the people that we coach. Just talk us through that article that you mentioned.
Yeah, I saw an article earlier this week, and it was talking about coaching and coaches, and there being kind of an almost fundamental problem with the industry.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas, with the idea being that a lot of coaches, um, or the perception around coaches, that it's all about um, chasing big dreams,
Mhm.
maybe things that people might think are a bit unrealistic, or maybe not necessarily things that they even want. So that there seems to be kind of like a perception around the whole coaching industry that it has to be about making loads of money, or it has to be about um, big adventures and things like that. When actually a lot more people that want coaching are people that may want smaller things. Maybe they just want help managing with their day to day life and managing their stresses and trying to get a bit more calm and clarity in their life. So not everybody's necessarily looking for the big dream. You know, it's starting with that idea of being more happy with what they have. So things that seem a bit more attainable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, completely. One of the things that I tend to look at with people, Kyle, and we've both done like the mind map stuff, and you've done the body map, and I've done like a little bit of neuromuscular work. A lot of people, they like you say, so there's nothing wrong with big dreams and stuff like that, but that big dream doesn't mean anything, if you don't know where you are right now and you can't work with what you've already got. The analogy that I tend to use with people is like map reading. I don't know if you've ever done any like Duke of Edinburgh orienteering, any kind of stuff like that.
No,
One of
I
the
was too busy playing PlayStation as a kid.
Oh, you're such a lazy git. One of the things that they teach you in map reading is the most important thing that you need to know on a map is exactly where you are, not where you want to go. That's irrelevant. The most important thing is where you are exactly, because you can always work out from where you are to somewhere. Right? It might not be directly where you want to go initially, but you can always go somewhere. Whereas if you don't know where you are, you can't even start. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, sometimes as coaches do get a bit like, yeah, let's lose £4 billion in the next 24 hours, or make 1 million in like whatever area you're working in, and they forget the day-to-day little stresses, and I'm sure you deal with clients with stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Not just clients.
Yeah, actually, do you know what? Like you say, Kyle, it's like, oh, let's get your business to this amazing level. It's like, look, right now, my kids won't go to sleep and won't tidy their bedroom up. That business means jack to me at this moment in time. Yeah, I'm sure you were thinking the same when your car wouldn't start. It's like, look, right now, I just want the car to start.
Yeah, it gets a bit like that sometimes. So, um, what was the original point we were talking about?
Make
It's
your
gone.
article go.
Ah, yes, article. Yeah, so I think a big thing with this idea of coaching, and maybe sometimes it puts people off, um, or triggers threat. Like we talked about last week: too fast, too slow, unclear intent. Um, Coaches diving in straight away, trying to go in with these big goals, and maybe it's not necessarily something they're ready or looking for right now. And maybe that the actual thought of actually being put under pressure to go, well, actually, I have to have this big goal, I have to have this big ambition, in itself can trigger a threat. Um, Whereas, like you said, maybe the immediate change or the immediate thing that they want to deal with might be a bit more of a smaller scale thing. And it may not necessarily be about changing something either. It may actually be about developing better strategies for coping. So, great example you've just used. We were talking about the kids not going to bed and not tidying their room and stuff. You know, you're not coaching's not ever going to make your kids, or you having a coach is never going to make your kids tidy their room. So, what you've got to look at is having a better coping strategy, so you don't throw said kids out of the window, which I'm sure you wouldn't do anyway. But
no, of course not. Sorry, no, of course. Yeah. No, you're right. So yeah, you just come up with better strategies, whatever they may be. You know, you walk out the room, you take a few deep breaths, and then you go back in. And like you say, it's just because of that you are a lot less stressed out. You know, the level of threat is so much lower, or the threat kicks in, but you recognize it, and more importantly, you can pull it back. Because I think that's something else that they don't talk about. When you do the big dreams and goals, it's like, oh, my life's always perfect. I have no threats. It's like, really? Well, none at all. Yeah, it's like, okay. Yeah. It's like, no, look, we've all still got them, but we just have a better, and it's like you say about, you know, unclear intent. We have a better ability to predict and respond. So we recognize that threat and respond accordingly with a better strategy.
yeah, absolutely. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. That's what managing threats all about. But I think the big thing really is that, you know, I think everybody's got to some degree sort of big goals, ambitions, dreams, desires. They're not necessarily always going to be the same thing for everybody. You know, everybody's big dreams are going to be different. But you're never going to be in a place where you can start really thinking about those things or really strategizing for those things, really a lot of planning or any of that until you're in a place where you've dealt with the threat and you create some safety around it. So I think that was kind of the point of the article. Really, I'll have to find it, and what I'll do is when I find it, I'll attach it to the bottom of the video. I'll link it because I can't even remember who it was written by. I kind of came across it in passing, but it was just an interesting perspective, and I think as coaches, it's something that's really important to us because I mean, if you look at even in the health and fitness industry, we talk a lot about people coming to us to lose weight, and they're very focused on the number, or the meaning of that number, that representation. And then all of a sudden, when they think about all of the things that they have to do to actually get there, it triggers that overwhelm, and all of a sudden it becomes almost like an insurmountable task.
Yeah.
So that's where, and I think that's where maybe a lot of PTs maybe struggle with clients quite a lot, is that they're trying to push this goal that they think is the be all and end all, which is the reason why they've hired a PT in the first place, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is, until you deal with the other stuff, until you actually deal with all like the build up of things, the overwhelm, the frustration, excuse me, you know, you're never going to make that progress. So I think a lot of it is about, in the short term, maybe developing better strategies, being clear on kind of what's going on right now, what does and doesn't serve, and creating those better strategies so that you can actually look at the bigger goals later on. And that's something that we've covered in Mind Map, isn't it? And I've done that in other coaching models as well. Is you don't set the goal first.
No.
The goal setting is something that actually comes further along down the line. You actually deal with the threat first and create the safety, then you can start exploring what the goals are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Like we said, you know, the brain, it just won't let you go forward. You know, and I know we've both been in positions in both of us in times of our lives where we've had it in, you know, various different arenas, and until you're safe, or until your brain thinks you are safe, let me rephrase that, it just won't go forward at all, you know. And it doesn't matter how, you know, much you want it, you know, and oh, I really desire it, and all that, I'm gonna swear, crap about you know, oh, you don't want it bad enough and just do it. And it's like, well, look, if your brain doesn't think you're safe, if it can't even predict on a very basic level, you know, how to keep itself safe, what the hell, if you think about it with common sense, it's actually a perfect mechanism to prevent self-harm. Yeah, it can't even predict on a basic level a simple level of safety with regards to whatever it is that you're thinking about, why would it then allow you to throw yourself out there? Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, but people call this self-sabotage. No, it's not. All right, it's actually self-preservation when you think about it. Yeah, that is a form of self-preservation. It's a very clever system, but like you say, you have to deal with that immediate threat, and if you don't, then it's one of the reasons why, and we see it time and time again, people set these big goals, they start, and then the overwhelm kicks in, like you say, and it's just like, boom, kick you back down. And I think that's a big difference, is that, and that if when you do it, you get kicked back down so often enough, obviously, we understand the whole neural association, you form an emotion around that pattern, and it's no wonder people don't even start.
Yeah, they're told they're going to fail before they've started. The brain doesn't bother.
Yeah. So no, it is designed to just protect you. So, like you say, it's just dealing with the day-to-day stuff. The little bits that people might not think that is that important. And like you say, I mean, we've both done this, Kyle. I've been there with clients in the past and gone, oh, you need to do your exercise in the evening. You need to do your exercise in the evening. And especially now I've got kids myself. Do you know what? Right now, when they won't go to bed, and we just had a screaming match, and there's been tears, mainly on my side, tears. Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you, Kyle. I'm a PT right now, and obviously I'm doing this with you. I don't want to exercise. I just want to sit there and calm the hell down and just be like, yeah, you know what? I get that. Yeah, and it's like you say, you just need a better strategy. But it's such a simple thing that I think a lot of the time people overlook this. Even when sometimes they may be thinking about it or know it as coaches and sometimes as trainers, it's like, no, it's too simple. It can't be that. Well, do you know what? Actually, something I've learned, and you must have done this in my mind. Actually, do you know what? It's the simple stuff that actually is normally the answer.
Well, that's the thing. We tend to overcomplicate things more than anything else. Or as humans, we have this desire to complicate everything. But the brain knows exactly what it wants and exactly what it needs. We just need to get the hell out of the way and let it sort itself out.
That's exactly the definition. Yeah, definitely. Like you say, just remove the brakes and get out of the way. That's it. It'll do it itself.
It's quite interesting because I remember us having this conversation. It must have been maybe a couple of years ago. We were talking about self-help, and we were talking about why maybe it doesn't necessarily work for a lot of people, but it does work for some. And we were talking about some people have got almost like that success blueprint already because they've got maybe a slightly different meaning around success and maybe some experience or something else. There's something there that allows them to take that stuff forward, whereas a lot of people they don't necessarily get it. And I think a lot of that comes down. We talked a little bit about communication styles, and but that's all going to play its part because we all will have different communication styles. We all respond differently to different things in different ways. But I think where a lot of the self-help programs tend to go wrong, at least from my experience, from what I've seen, from what I've tried, is that they try and dive straight into a lot of the purpose, the mission, the desires, the dreams, and all this, that, and the other, and the wonderful SMART goals, if you remember those. But they don't actually do anything to deal with the threat and create the safety first. And I think that a lot of that is the missing link. Now, if you haven't laid that foundation and you haven't dealt with all the stuff that's actually stopping you in the first place, it's all well and good having affirmations and being told, positive thinking this and positive thinking that, right? But we both know that from a neurological perspective, the brain is designed to attract negativity like shit on a stick. That is what it is wired to do because that is part of the survival mechanism. So all of a sudden, positive thinking in itself or the idea of positive thinking in itself can create threat.
Yeah.
Because then there's this whole thing, if I'm expected to think positively but I can't, that makes me a failure, and then we get the judgment and we get the shame and all the other associations and meanings, and we end up reverting back into all these behaviours that don't serve where we want to go.
Yeah.
So I think personally, and I'm sure you'll probably agree, I don't know, I'm just going to put words in your mouth and say that you agree with me. Yeah, that I think that in most of these programs, this is the bit that's missing.
Yeah.
And until you sort this part of it out, you know, it's like you say, you're just going to constantly be stuck. So it is a case of dealing with the blockages and the breaks, and they are going to be little. They are probably going to be seemingly little things. They're not necessarily going to be big things all the time. You know, they don't always have to be linked to past trauma. It's just to do with associations and meanings that we give things.
Yeah.
You know, and daily habits and routines and things. You know, the things that we do without thinking that may not necessarily serve us.
Yeah.
From things that just get wired into our brain, they're not necessarily bad things. They just don't help us go to where we want to go.
Yeah, man. Yeah, totally. I completely agree with you, mate. And like you said about that conversation, it is a vital missing link. It's almost like sometimes, again, I don't know whether it's the author's fault or the way that they've been trained or the perspective, whether they've not put that in or they've just naturally been able to do it. It's like you say, they start, you know, it's almost like, the way that I think about it is it's like a tree, right? And this is the soil, and they start writing their books from the soil up, right? So this is the stuff where it's go right, yeah, like you say, it's the purpose. But under here is the roots, and that's where your threat, that's where your day-to-day stuff, you know. That sometimes the not so fun stuff. Again, it's much like the fat loss stuff, Kyle. It's the not so sexy stuff down here. No one wants to talk about it, but this is the stuff that gets you up above the soil and then allows the tree to grow. Yeah. And there's a guy I know in like the business and financial area, a guy called T. Harv Eker, and he's got a great little saying, and it is the roots create the fruit.
Yeah.
And without that stuff, like you say, without that, what's going on, without how to manage the threat or, you know, get yourself out of that environment that creates the threat, then it doesn't work. And you and I both know, and I think actually that's one of the most interesting things that I've learned off Mind Map, right? Is you can do all the work on your values, you can do all the work on your purpose, you can do all of that, but when you're in threat, your brain is responsible to the physical environment. And that means, you know, any change in the physical environment will create an immediate shift in your brain. So you can have your purpose, your values now wired down. If you've got a threat or something that kicks you off, I'm going to say the word stress, just because that's probably what our clients may know it better as, right?
Yeah.
In your environment creates a stress response, right? All those values and purpose go bin. Yeah, your brain just goes dump. Yeah, I need to deal with this, and it doesn't matter what. And that's one of the things is try and get yourself out of the environment or change your environment in some way. You know, if you can't get yourself out, then stick some music on, something to make it a little bit better. Yeah, and it's amazing how quickly that can actually change just by doing some of the environmental work. I think that's a big thing. You know, like you say, deal with the threat, change your environment, and then, do you know what? Then you might actually be able to do the stuff above the soil.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that ties in quite well with something that I posted yesterday, actually, wasn't it? Where I was talking about the difference between control and influence, where we are constantly trying to control everything because it is a form of safety, right? Because if we feel like we're in control, then we've got a prediction and response. But when that environment changes and you realise that you have no control, the prediction and the response disappears. It triggers that threat, and then you do go into that freeze, fight, and flight. You know, you do so. I don't want to get myself out of bed, or you want to rip someone's throat out, or you want to just burn it all to the ground and run for the hills. You know, so
yeah,
it doesn't matter what it is you're doing, like you say, what your mission, what your purpose, or any of that stuff is. It all becomes irrelevant if there's a sudden shift in environment and the brain feels like it has no control. That there is no there is no prediction of safety, then none of that matters. The brain will always dictate that, well, this is the next course of action: fight, flight, freeze.
Yeah, Yeah, massively. It's quite an interesting one, especially when you realise there's not actually much that you can really control. I mean, you can control your emotions to a certain degree, not to the, like you said in your post, you know, not to the absolute nth degree that we try and do it. You know, I think the word, like you said, influence. Yeah, we can influence, we can persuade, but absolute control, no. Not possible. And I think that's a really scary thought for some people. That is a really, really scary thought. It's like, oh, I can control this. No, you can't.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that does create a big threat in a lot of people. So I didn't actually. Obviously, you mentioned there. I said about influence, and that you can influence the environment. You can influence change to a degree, depending on what the nature of the threat is or what's going on around.
Yeah.
And that thing. So we can always influence. And one of the key things I really spoke about, which I think was kind of the core of the post, really was having the ability to adapt, and it comes back to having those coping strategies in place.
Yeah.
To actually be able to recognize that when you're under threat, when you are going into that fight, flight, or freeze mode, that you have something in place where you can take a step back where it's appropriate. Obviously, if the ground's falling underneath your feet, then that's a little bit different. Then I would say flight's a pretty sound reaction. But for all the other little things, so cars breaking down, as we've had this week, kids not going to bed. You know, it's about being able to recognize those threats and let go of that idea of control and just adapt, accept the fact that the environment's changed, and look at better ways to cope and create new strategies, so that then actually you can reduce or remove, or at least reduce the threat. So then you can create better predictions, new responses based on those better predictions, and then affect a better outcome.
Amen. So, Kyle, are you telling me that when my kids won't go to bed because they've left all their toys over the floor, I can't turn into Hulk Dad? Are you saying that my fight response is not an appropriate response?
I never said that.
No, you're right. And it just calms things down a hell of a lot. You know, whatever. You know, I'm sure you wanted to Hulk smash the car when it.
Oh, mate, I was ready to go all Basil Fawlty. I had a branch and everything.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Oh, I love it.
When I say branch, I mean more of a twig, but that's not really the point.
Yeah. Just going on ninja with this twig. Yeah. Some kind of trip.
You start.
Brilliant. Oh, I love it. Yeah, totally. And it's really interesting. Some of the strategies, you know, once you've got a different strategy, it's amazing just how quickly change can be. I had a really interesting one a couple of weeks ago. There's a lady, her biggest stress, she basically drives sort of Exeter to Plymouth. It's a 30-odd mile trip each way.
So it's like driving to London from here every day.
Yeah, pretty much. Traffic's same as the A127 up there, you know, nose to bumper, you know, really slow, and she gets really bad bouts of road rage. Right? She just like walks into work like, not like someone else we know, Kyle. And basically, it was like, well, okay, well, what do you do? And she's like, oh, I'll get brief. And I'm like, right, look, okay, this is your new strategy, all right? And this is basically, we go, so I said, what's your favorite music? She went, oh, I love Queen. I'm like, oh, brilliant. All right. If you got it on your iPod, okay. All right, what I want you to do for me, all right, is go home and create a non-road rage. I said, I'm going to call it a road calm playlist. She's like, okay. And she's like, do a play. And I'm like, no, you start, all right, as soon as you get into that situation. I'm like, yeah, because if something interrupts that playlist, it's just going to make you worse, and you're going to associate that playlist with being interrupted, right? So you can have any other playlist, but this one specifically, as soon as an incident occurs, bang. Okay. And she's like, oh, okay, well, how loud? And I'm like, honestly, I want it that loud that basically, and I want you rocking out. I want you singing along. I want you doing your best Freddie Mercury impression to this playlist. And she's like, okay, so when you're stuck in that bumper and someone's just cut you up, yeah, instead of going, you're going to be banging your head, you know, rocking out to Queen. I want the cars next to you to be able to hear your music. And it's only been 2 weeks, but all of a sudden she's like, yeah, the journey to work's really good. And that is literally all I've done with her. Yeah, and because she's not stressed out, she then doesn't want to eat rubbish at work. She then doesn't want to veg out on the sofa when she gets home. Bang. You know? Have I even spoke to her about nutrition? No. I haven't even touched on it. It's just happened.
And sometimes it is that stupidly simple, you know. It can be just that little change can make such a huge difference to how the rest of your day goes, right? Because again, if we look at it from that really that neurological perspective, it's all to do with the state of the brain. So if you set the brain up in a good state, your behavior will be very different to how it would be if you're in a bad state. And if we think, you know, the whole thoughts, actions, behaviors, or thoughts, feelings, actions, behaviors, however we want to look at it, that all comes back to the brain. So better state of the brain, the better the outcome. Worse state of the brain, the worse the outcome. It is really that simple. And like you say, a lot of people find it difficult to accept that sometimes it is that simple. It's not always that as easy as that illustration, but a lot of the time it can be.
Yeah. No, totally. It's the whole like Occam's razor type thing. You know, usually the simplest answer is usually the most correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, no, 100%. I mean, I've done it myself, Kyle. I don't know. Like, I've actually got different playlists for different things. I've got like when I work out, I've got really aggressive, like Drowning Pool, Rob Zombie, you know, really Slipknot, really aggressive rock music, grungy type rock. Yeah, that's what I used to get fired up to train. Yeah, I've got Happy Tunes. That's my going into work one. If I've got clients, I want to be happy. Yeah. I've even got my relaxation one, which my wife has affectionately nicknamed Graham's Late Night Love, because she says it sounds like an old 1990s. Basically, it was the romance section on Essex Radio back in the 90s, and that was the name of the TV show. And apparently, my relaxation playlist sounds more like an episode of Graham's Late Night Love.
All right, I thought she was calling you Graham Norton, but you know that's probably a conversation for outside this webcast.
Yeah, I think that's a different webcast we're on. Yeah, and just, you know, like you say, is once you've played it a few times, just by even reading the playlist name, my brain just starts to go, oh, I know what mood I need to be in now. Yeah. In fact, guys, if you want a bit of homework, go and start creating playlists. Trust me, this is one of the things I did as part of my year-long mind map mastery. It's one of my homeworks, playlists for different times. Yeah, and just start playing them. You know, make them fun, make them songs that you enjoy. You know, and there's songs that should evoke a feeling of whatever you want at that time. You know, so like hence why I've got really aggressive rock music to fire me up when I'm actually training. Really cool, really cool tip. Amazing how quickly it works.
Yeah, it is an awesome thing. I've actually got a worksheet that I give to clients to do that very thing. I don't know if I can attach it to the YouTube link. If I can't, what I'll do is I'll set it up on the website as a download, and I'll post a link to that. If you've got a similar one, Dave, as well, we'll put them together. So then, you know, they can work through both of them or whatever. Yeah, I'll see if we can do that. And try and do that as a result of this, so that way that you've actually got a little worksheet to work through to help you create those playlists. I mean, I'd highly recommend it. I get my clients to do it as well, especially for like coaching sessions and PT sessions. I've got different playlists. Each client's got a couple of different playlists, one for working out, one for relaxation,
awesome.
that sort of thing. So, you know, when we come in and do our energizer and qigong at the beginning, you know, to try and shift the nervous system into a better state, you know, they've got a playlist for that. When we need to pick it up a little bit, if we're going to go and do some circuit work or pads or something like that, then they've got a playlist for that, and so on. So yeah, it's a really useful exercise to do, and it's very effective. But again, it might seem like it's really simple, but it can be really powerful. So yeah. Great tip, Dave. We like that.
Yeah, no worries. And guys, but when Kyle says like I'll do one as well, what he actually means, right, is I'll email Kyle mine, because yeah, me putting things on a website and doing anything technical, yeah, I leave technical stuff to people like Kyle that know what they're doing. I'll just be like, yeah, no.
Yeah, I like the fact that he says people that know what they're doing. I'll probably spend the next 4 hours tomorrow trying to work out how to set up a simple link.
No, somehow, guys, we will get some kind of worksheet to you. Maybe. Brilliant. No, it's fantastic. I think that's a.
Well, in that, what I'll do is we'll put email addresses at the bottom of the video. If you email us, we'll email it to you. But no, I'll try and get it live and put it on the bottom of the video.
Brilliant. It's interesting, like you say, about going for the big goals and so on and so forth, Kyle. I think something that you see with coaches as well is the whole, and again, in any industry, I think you see this a lot. They portray this image of, their life is always so super successful. It's like, you know what? It's like they won't almost show the vulnerable side of them. It's like, yeah, I've again, whatever area, it's like I've got this super amazing body and I never eat any bad food. Okay, really? Ever? Or my business is so amazing, it never flops. Not really? What? Ever? It's like, oh, come on. It's like, are you telling me that you don't have any stress in your life whatsoever? Do you know what? You must be the most boring human being in existence.
How many books or how many stories have you read? Duncan Bannatyne, Peter Jones, those guys. They've all had businesses that have absolutely bombed, and at some point probably lost most of their money. So it's like you say. It doesn't matter how successful somebody is; they might create this image. That doesn't mean that they haven't had undesired results. It happens, and that's part of the process. It's like Thomas Edison. He's famous when he invented the light bulb. He went through 10,000 different variations on how to do a light bulb, and when they asked him, why didn't you give up? Well, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work.
Yeah, amen. I love that. That's a great story. I think my other favorite one is I can't remember. It's the millionaire and the ship mechanic, and basically the ship won't work, and he comes along with a hammer and he taps the screw in with a hammer, and basically writes him an invoice and hands it to the millionaire, and it's like for $10,000, and he's like, that's preposterous. I'm not paying him. And so he's like, if you can justify me why it's £10,000 or $10,000, sorry, I'll pay it. So on the paper he writes, tapping screw, $1. Knowing where to tap just by listening to the engine, 9,999. Hands it back. It's brilliant, and that's the sort of level of mastery of skill, when you're at that level of coaching, which is fantastic. What about, Kyle? Because something else we spoke about just before we set up, about coaching being a little bit airy-fairy, all right? And sometimes I'm going to be totally honest, I do struggle with this one, right? It's not that I'm not spiritual. I suppose there's some bits of me that struggles with this. It's like, all right, okay, it's all very well you saying this, and I cross my legs and chant Om Shanti, and but if you can't help me deal with the day-to-day struggles that I might, excuse me, right? How does that airy-fairy stuff, to point out, actually help? What would your response be about that?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So I think for me, it'd be a case of reframing what airy-fairy actually is, and maybe looking at it from a slightly different perspective. It's looking at every person's going to be different. So you actually used the word spiritual there. You said not particularly spiritual. So that's fine. You get a lot of people that are not. So you don't have to make it a spiritual element. But if you explain something like, maybe for example, doesn't necessarily have to be like sitting and chanting mantras, but it could be something like qigong or whatever else. When you actually start explaining the physiological and the neurological effect on the brain and the body. So if we look at it from a scientific perspective, which I'm going to make the broad assumption there that if someone's not particularly spiritual, then they're probably going to be able to relate better to the scientific approach.
Mhm.
You know, it's just a case of reframing. So then all of a sudden, it's not airy fairy. It's just another form of training. It's not about you know, praying to the Almighty or anything like that. It's just about the slow movement and the breathing to actually switch your brain into a different state, so that actually you're more prepared to do what you need to do or work out what you need to work out.
No, that's cool. Yeah, no, totally. I'd 100% agree with that. I had a client that used those exact words, like, I don't want to do any of the airy fairy stuff. Okay, cool, we won't. And you know, the breathing, I just took her through a process of literally, okay, phase 1, learn to lie still and breathe. Phase 2, learn to lie still, breathe, and think of your favorite memories. Okay? After that, start to practice emptying your mind, and then eventually you can lie there and empty your mind. You know, it's like, oh yeah, no, this is really good. It's like, I'm quite calm, I'm relaxed. Okay, all right. You know, that's what they call meditation. Just out of, you know, it's like, oh, is it? Yeah. Oh, this isn't so bad. There we go. It's like you say, it's just relating to them in a way that they can understand.
Yeah, and I think like, it comes back to a lot of we said earlier about meanings and associations and things like that. You know, they create an association and a meaning around a word.
Yeah.
Take the word away, you take away the association, you call it something else, you reframe it. All of a sudden, it becomes relaxation, or you know, finding calm, or whatever you want to call it. Or safe havens is the term that we tend to use. But whatever, you know, you adapt to the client, and because that's the thing, right? If you've got someone who's resistant from the start, or it triggers some kind of negative association, or it triggers a threat. So the thing, I think the common association I tend to find with people that don't buy into or struggle with it, airy fairy as we call it, is the idea of it being too slow and not getting a result.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you can take the threat away from that, look at a different perspective and do it in a way that actually they can find it enjoyable, instead of doing it in a way that they're not going to enjoy. Because if you try and push somebody to do something that they're not going to enjoy or they don't like doing, then it's never going to stick, it's never going to take, and then you know, the change is never going to occur.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a case of reframing it and finding a way to do it in a way that best suits that person.
Yeah, 100%. And it's amazing once you can actually reframe it and give it and get them, you know, to understand it in language that they get, and you sort of see that light bulb moment and go, oh yeah, I get that. You know, and it's just really funny. The one of the bits that I do love is like you know, like you say, once you do reframe it, and you know, effectively, let's get bluntly honest, we said exactly the same thing, just in a different language. Okay? Yeah, totally different terms. It's the same thing, you know, but it's just getting it into a language that they can understand, and it's then getting them, like you say, to relate and change their meaning around that, to then say, oh, actually, you know, we've just done some safe haven work, we've found some calm and some breathing exercises. It's like, well, okay, what's different to the qigong, the meditation, you know, and breathing into your anubandha, if you use some of the yoga terms? Well, actually, if you look at them side by side, nothing. There is no difference. But it's just relating it in a way to the person that they can understand. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people, again, Kyle, there seems to be a recurring theme in our conversation tonight. It's the simple stuff that people overlook.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, if we're starting to look at drawing this to a close, I think that's probably the key message of what our conversation's been about is, you know, start at the beginning and keep it simple. Deal with the simple stuff, the stuff that may not necessarily be obvious. But when you actually think about it, and like you say, you have that aha moment, you have that light bulb moment, you go, oh yeah. You know, it can be something really mind-numbingly even simple, you know, like you said with the lady with the road rage. Still change the environment, make the experience more enjoyable. It has a knock-on effect, because it changes the state of her brain and how she feels when she gets to work and when she gets home. She's in a better place to do the things she wants to do, as opposed to being stressed out, tired, and fed up when she walks through the door. Same thing when it comes to food or anything like that. You know, instead of trying to force yourself to jump into a stressful diet, make smaller changes, look in different areas. You know, before you start looking at what you eat, maybe look at your rituals around eating. You know, what do you do when you eat? Are you rushed around? Are you stressed out? You know, do you eat in front of the TV or the laptop, or, you know, eating out of a Tupperware tub? You know, so they're things that people don't necessarily think about, but they are very simple, and they can have a very, very, well, profound, I think, impact on the way that, you know, on the change that people can actually experience and the transformation they can achieve just by doing those simple things. Like taking 5 minutes out of your day to relax and breathe. It might sound bonkers, but again, we've already said, if it calms the nervous system down, it changes the way that you approach everything. Yeah. By turning the laptop off when you have your dinner, you know, you can actually sit and be more aware of what you're eating and how you feel when you're eating it. So you're not mindless. So all of a sudden, you're not just consuming and consuming without thinking. You know, you can actually listen to your body, and if it says, actually, I've had enough, you stop, as opposed to going and just eating without realizing while you're typing or watching TV or whatever else. So, you know, a lot of the time it is those very, very simple things that have the biggest impact, and actually they support all the other things, and they allow you to do all the other things that maybe you think you should do or you want to do more of.
Yeah, like you say, Carl, like you say, if it's coming to a close, that is it. It's just, you know, look at simple changes that you can make, simple little things that you can do consistently that will support everything else. You know, get the roots sorted first and then create the bigger changes. There you go. That's a good one to end on, isn't it?
Yeah, that was a very nice little summary, Dave. It was much more concise than mine.
Kyle, we've done almost an hour of actual content. This is really scary.
Hang on a minute. Yeah, I know. Right, we've been serious all this whole podcast, or this whole webcast. Sorry. What you guys are not necessarily privy to is that before we started doing this webcast,
what we were doing,
we were messing about with Google Hangouts, and we've discovered all these wonderful little features that we've been messing about with.
Look at that facial hair. That is awesome. I love your hat, Kyle. You look like the cat in the hat.
No, I am a cat.
That's good, Kyle. I like.
Right. I think we should have. I think we should have bought while we still can.
Yeah, maybe. I'm just going to put my lighthouse in the background. Yeah, like you say, Kyle.
Pirate Devil Ghost.
Indeed.
On his birthday. Right, guys. If you haven't run for the hills already, feel free to send us your questions or any issues you might have, or comments as well. You know, we'd love to hear some feedback if you've actually managed to stick it through to the end and you've got something to say. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to get rid of the cat face. That's better. I'm looking at myself when I do it and think I can't take myself seriously. Yeah, we'd love to have some feedback. So get in touch with us if you've got any questions, if you've got any comments, anything that you want us to ramble about, anything that maybe you think we can help with. Yeah, just drop a comment in underneath the video, or alternatively, we'll have some website links where you can find email addresses and all sorts. So, Dave, it's been a surreal pleasure as always.
No worries, it's the same.
Enjoy your cake, and I will speak to you next week.
No worries, Kyle. Take care, man.
Cheers, mate. Bye for now.
Bye.